Hello everybody, it's Colin Ellis here and welcome to another episode of the Culture and Coffee podcast for Monday the 17th of April 2023. Now you may have noticed that the background noise is slightly different and there's a chair moving on a wooden deck just to prove my point. It's not the usual hubbub of cafe. I'm actually on the island of Mallorca at the minute, currently ruining a family holiday by recording this podcast, if I'm honest. But that's all right, as long as you don't feel guilty about encouraging me to do that, that's absolutely fine. So yes, on the island of Mallorca, if you are not familiar with Mallorca, Mallorca is the largest of what's known as the Balearic Islands, so it's in the Mediterranean. So geographically, it's about, without consulting Google Maps, about 250 kilometres east of Barcelona. So if you find Barcelona on the map and go east from there, you'll eventually come to Mallorca, which is the largest of the islands, or the Balearic Islands. Menorca is Ibiza. Ibiza's a Balearic Island as well, I think. And Formentor, yeah, that's the other one. They're the big ones anyway. It's about 45 minutes by plane from Barcelona and about 2 hours from the UK. I'm in between UK engagements at the minute, so it made sense for the family to come out here and meet me, which is all very nice. I'm currently in the northwest of the island. It's northwest of the island in a seaside place called Puerto Pollença, a very historic place, Pollença, which is the town, and not far is the port. And I'm sat in a bar, if I'm honest. I'm not going to try and make out that I'm not in a bar. Yeah, I'm sat reading a book in a forest. No, I'm not. I'm in a bar. In front of a beach. It's a beautiful beach, beautiful turquoise waters. There's an old couple asleep in sunbeds opposite me. Probably British, getting completely and utterly burned so that they can peel that first layer of skin off and then go again tomorrow. It's the classic British way. So you'll hear lots of noises, people getting drinks around me, none of which are coffee, I have to say, and I'll be honest, I'm not drinking coffee either. I'm drinking a sangria. I did the last podcast, I did a Spanish coffee, so I felt the need to switch it up a bit, and given that I'm actually trying to take a break, I'm going to have a sangria. Now, sangria, if you don't know sangria, its kind of base is red wine, and here in Spain, it's Rioja as the red wine, and then you basically add fruit to kind of sweeten the drink, really. And in the sangria I've got here, it's got lemon, it's got orange, it's got strawberry. You can also have, mango, pineapple, peach, maybe lime. Yeah, you can add anything really just to sweeten the taste of it. But sangria is one of those drinks that it can only be called sangria if it's from Spain or Portugal. It's like, feta cheese being from Greece and Cornish pasties being from Cornwall in England. I'm sure there are better examples, but they're the ones that I'm going to go with. So yes, it can only be called sangria if it's from Spain or Portugal. So I'm enjoying a sangria by the beach. It's a very, very pleasant 22, 23 degrees. You can tell the Brits are down to the, kind of Speedos. Well, they don't really do Speedos, which is probably, given the look of some, that sounds terrible. They've got their swim shorts on. You know what I mean? Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this. It's got nothing to do with the podcast. But the Brits are the ones who literally take all of their clothes off when it's about 15 degrees. And I used to be one of them. Not anymore. Living in Australia can do that for you. All right, let's get on with the podcast today. We've got 5 ideas to do meetings. Well, now I've talked about meetings in the past, and I talk about them periodically, mainly because some people are so bad, and like most people really, really suck at them. But I want to give you some, I want to put a real positive spin on this. What are some things you can do to do them well? So 5 things. Now, the first thing, which is about 6 things in one, so get your pens out, is to do the basics well. Actually, I think if everyone did the basics well, it would significantly improve meetings. And meetings are really important because there are ways, meetings are where we make decisions and potentially share information. That's generally what we use meetings. They're a very formal construct. Most people waste so much time to meeting. And now the basics include things like, having an agenda, making sure it's timed, and making sure you start on time and finish on time. Make sure that you invite people who can contribute to the decision that's being made, not just everybody. Make sure that when you invite those people that you actually give them a voice, you invite them into the conversation, you make sure that they participate. I think sometimes meetings are seen as a bit of an effort to keep people happy. Well, you have to invite, well, if you've invited Colin, you have to invite Julia. Well, and absolutely not, no. You want to make sure that meetings are a valuable use of people's time. So if you're inviting people to a meeting, then it's only right that they get a say. You don't just gloss over it. So make sure that you're kind of doing all of those basics well. Make sure that people are present. One of the criticisms that's levelled at virtual meetings, there's a couple of criticisms around that. Firstly is, how do you get people to turn the cameras on? Well, firstly, make sure it's in the meeting invite to say this is a cameras on meeting. And, I've talked about this in the past, just because you can have cameras on doesn't mean you should for everything. I think, where you're setting expectations, it's important to look people in the eye, even if it's virtually. But for everything else, it's not always necessary. But these are all things that go in the meeting invite so that people know what the expectations are. People are really good when you set out what your expectations are. They'll go, he said this is meetings on, cameras on meeting, so that's what we're going to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing when it comes to virtual meetings, again, this is still part of the basics, believe it or not, this is not rocket science, is that you tell people to shut down anything else they might be working on and concentrate and be present on the meeting. And there's a distinct lack of trust, and I've talked about this with virtual. There's a distinct lack of trust in many organisations. We doubt people's intentions. We doubt that they're concentrating fully. You always know when people aren't. And my argument is always, actually, if you expect the best of people, then that's generally what you'll get. But also, you should be looking for ways to reduce the demands on the productive time. But basics, like at a minimum, if you can make sure that the agenda is in the meeting invite, if you can make sure that it starts on time and it finishes on time, but even better, finishes early, right? If you can do those basics well all of the time, people generally won't have a problem with meetings. If you think about it, you're like, actually, if every meeting started on time, ended on time, it had a purpose. People were prepared when they came into the meeting, so we weren't just winging it as we go. Or you weren't, even worse, it's like reading through the papers during the meeting. If we were doing the basics well, that would be okay. So I think, for me, that if you can do the basics well, yes, you can immediately transform your meetings overnight. So that's the first thing. The second thing is related to that, as a guy throws 2 empty wine bottles into a bin next to me. If you slightly jealous that he's that far ahead. The second thing is that if you make a statement, I always think you should make a statement. Every time I run a culture workshop with a team and we say things are going to be different, we document everything, we produce a great culture deck, and we do all of these things, right? Is as soon as we do all of that, we publicly state that things will be different. All right, so if you decide to do the basics well, and that's what you're going to say, is then you give people the opportunity to actually reject badly set up meetings. So if you say, right, the agenda needs to now be in every meeting invite, as soon as people get the meeting invite and it's not got the agenda in there, then people should be allowed to reject those meetings without having to say anything. I think too often what we do is we say, right, everything's going to be different, and then there's no accountability. So, a great way to transform your meetings and force behaviour change. We want people to do the right thing, but sometimes we have to take action to force behaviour change. Is if you get a meeting invite, there's no agenda in it, there's no idea of the preparation that you need to make, and so on and so forth, you should be able to just immediately reject it. Immediately, without having to say anything. And people will start to get the message. Trust me, if no one turns up for their meeting, they'll be like, oh yeah, I didn't set it up properly. Right? And then I know some of you out there will go, oh, well, that's really rude. No, it's not. It's rude not to set it up in the first place, properly in the first place. It's rude to waste your time. That's what's rude. The third thing, and again, these are kind of linked but kind of not. You can do them independently. It's entirely up to you. Call for a meeting reset. Now, you can do this in your own team, you can do this as an organisation or as a department, it's entirely up to you. And meeting resets, which is something I recently read about, a software company, Asana, did this, which I love this idea. A meeting reset is where they clear the calendars of all meetings. How great is that? So if you feel like you're overwhelmed by meetings, now again, immediately you'll be fixed mindset about this. We can't do that. And I can't do that. There's no way I can cancel my boss's meeting, of course. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that you get in trouble with your boss, but this is for you as a team. If you're overwhelmed by meetings, make a decision to change them up. Maybe you'll go back and do the basics well, and you'll say, right, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Let's do a meeting reset, and let's cancel every single meeting that we've got in our calendars right now. If you truly want to transform your meetings, let's kill them all. Let's do a complete reset. Yeah. That's a way to start. You can see it as starting afresh again. And, with all of these things, I encourage people and the teams that I work with, I encourage them to document it. Become a bit of a case study. I worked with one team recently. They've written it all up in a paper. They submitted it to the chief executive, who's going to put them up for an award. How good is that? So sorry, I just took a sip of I didn't tell you how my sangria tasted like I normally do with the coffee. Let me just tell you, it tastes great. Alcohol and fruit, what's not to like? So that's the third thing, call for a meeting reset. The fourth thing, and this for me is a big one, and it's something I try to eradicate. Wasn't always perfect. There were some things that I couldn't do it with, but you should ban recurring meetings, because recurring meetings for me are just a bit lazy. Recurring meetings are things that we just stick in there. We don't really think too much about. We end up kind of just talking about the same things over and over again, and without really. I think we just get lazy with recurring meetings. So you should aim for as few recurring meetings as possible. But then the argument, and I've heard it before, but Colin, it takes more time to plan in these regular meetings. Yeah, it does. Now, I used to have, kind of regular senior leadership team meetings. Of course, I'm going to plan those in. But that's not to say that they stayed the same forever. That's not to say that the agenda in the meeting invite stayed the same forever. It didn't. We were constantly thinking about changing it. So every time for every week we updated the meeting invite. Every 2 weeks? It was every 2 weeks, I think. We updated the meeting invite to include the points that we wanted to talk about. It wasn't just standard. I think that's the thing about the great cultures in the world is they don't do standard. They're unique. They're not just like, let's just do the same thing over and over again every week, every 2 weeks. So I think banning recurring meetings is another idea that you can kind of employ to transform your meetings. And then the last thing is something that every organisation should do, but they don't do it, and it's linked to all of the four things above, is you should teach people how to chair meetings. Actually physically teach people. Now, I know there are people that do it. If your organisation is one that has a how to chair meetings workshop, then you should do it. In my 2-day culture programs, it's often the module, because they're tailored, it's often the thing that people ask, Colin, can you add this? And I end up doing about 6 training sessions over 2 days. But I think it's really important, is we need to teach people how to run meetings, because otherwise what you get is this really uneven experience where some people know how to do chair meetings, some people don't know how to chair meetings. And what we want is a balance across. We want everybody to know how to do these things really, really well. And at that point, we get to the stage where, as an organisation, meetings are not a problem anymore. They're just these things that we do well consistently all of the time. Now, I started at the top of the show by talking about the fact that meetings are important. They are. What your goal should be is fewer, higher value meetings. And with any of these 5 tips, you can transform your meetings. And I want to wish you the very best of luck in doing so. Hope you've enjoyed today's Culture and Coffee podcast. Ta-ra for now.